What was interesting when you do a memoir and you look back in your life are just those little moments that just changed everything. And so I think it's the French part is so important because it almost felt like there was destiny that I was going to in France. Because when I was in sixth grade, they came around and said you have to take French or Spanish for seventh grade. And my father, he had wanted me to learn Spanish because it was spoken in our neighborhood, and I said, well, Spanish. And then the two popular kids in class, Anne and Dan, said, no, no, don't take Spanish. We're taking Spanish. And I was like, okay, French. And then boom, my life just changed from there. And by the time I got into high school, I had had AP French, which allowed me to go to university, the first in my family. And I thought French was over. And then one night I'm in my dorm room and this letter gets slipped under my door. And I'm like, what is this? I run out, no one's there. I open it and it's an invitation to the Junior Year Abroad in France program. And that hadn't been on my thoughts, on my list. And I said, let me go check it out. And I did. And that's a long story, but I just knew that this is what I had to do. And so I did, and I went for the year, and that changed everything. And then that sort of locked me into France.
What was it about France in particular, or maybe Europe in general, that it seemed that resonated with you best, right? Like there's a book out there I've read, it's called Nomad Capitalist. The premise of the book is mostly about going to somewhere where you can operate a business more effectively and efficiently as far as like tax wise or import export duties, things like that. However, the general theme of the book is like go to where you're treated best, go to where the lifestyle resonates with you, go to where like the climate suits you best, go to where you can operate your business and not pay, a ton of taxes. But the theme is go to where you're treated best. So when I've had experiences where I've been able to travel abroad a little bit to Spain and Portugal, I found that those cultures and the way of life suit me better. And having that experience, I think, is a better way of life for me. And my objective, one of my goals, is to live there on a permanent, semi-permanent basis as I sit here today. But when you're junior year abroad in college and you were in France for the first time, what were some of the things that touched your soul of like, this is where I need to live? This is a lifestyle that's best suited for me. What were some of those thoughts, and maybe like compare and contrast a little bit?
So many. I think first of all was quality of life, and just everything from the food to the culture. I found that in the States, to attain the quality of life that's very normal in France for the average French citizen, whether it be the quality of food, the quality of all around, the culture everywhere, the vacations, all these things, you had to be not in where I came from. I came from a very strong working class where you had to do 2-3 jobs, you barely made ends meet, and all the other things were just, honestly, my family food was just sustenance for the most part. And my dad, I used to joke, he would drink wine just to get the buzz, right? And he used to call it Kool-Aid with a kick. And there was never any sense of, this just taste this and figure out. And if in America that would sort of be related to snobism and to, elite or whatever. But no, in France, that was daily life. So there was that just got me. And I just really first learned to appreciate cuisine and food there. I didn't have that growing up. And then, of course, between the museums and the architecture and the history, boy, the history was a big one for me. And I think a lot of people that move abroad, they have a similar background where you feel like where you came from, you didn't feel quite you fit there. There was something off, And I would joke, was I adopted? Was I switched at birth? And I don't feel like this is where I should be. And I arrived there and it just felt like not home right away, but just connection. Speaking of Notre Dame just opened again, right? I just have an image burned in my head. It was raining and moody and people were filling up at the cafes and just that sense you could sit for hours and hours and almost trying to push you out the door and turn the tables. And I looked up at Notre Dame. I was walking by Notre Dame and there's gargoyle which was spitting out water. It was used as a gutter for the rainfall. And I looked at it and I said, this is 800 years old and it just connected with me. Like it was a soul connection, I have to say.
Thank you for sharing. The food thing is interesting to me because I also love food. I love to cook. I've cooked in restaurants before. And I think from what I'm hearing from you is that regardless of class status in France, you can get good food anywhere and people appreciate that, whether you're on the bottom sort of the socioeconomic scale or the top of the socioeconomic scale, is everybody appreciates good food and they have access to good food, and it's just not substance like you grew up with. Is that fair point?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And that really, really struck me there. Even now, I see you go to a party and the cheese is out and the wine is out. And there's a little, sometimes a little affected or whatever. But there, it's just normal. We lived with families when we went to France as a student. And my first family, they weren't the best cooks, but they always had fresh quality food that didn't exist in the town I was, or
Yeah.
if it did, you know where to find it. That's for sure. And they took the time at the table. That's the other big thing. That's why Thanksgiving sort of became my favorite holiday growing up, because I was like, oh, the one time we're kind of sitting at the table and just for hours and enjoying. That to me was the epitome of cuisine, was Thanksgiving, because that's when there really was an effort to make something of tradition, something that had real taste. And so that became my favorite. And then for there, being in France, I'm like, oh my God, like every week is Thanksgiving here, That's sort of how it felt to me. And the
Yeah.
different courses and how it lasts for 2 hours and just the variety. And then the regions. I mean, you go down even all through France and the working class or anyone will just tell, have you tried this? Have you tried that? It's just, and they're so proud of that heritage. Everyone's knowledgeable. They know that you eat this before that because it digests better. This is all common knowledge there, like often the salad will be at the end of the meal. They say sometimes that helps for digestion, things like that.
I didn't know that. This is my opinion. It might not be your opinion. And why and where does America get that wrong?
Who knows? I think part of it, I look back at my grandparents and they were immigrants and they would always talk about the Depression and living through the Depression. And I think just you kind of right away got into the mentality of the cheaper, the better, And so I think a lot of it comes down to price, and people wouldn't want to pay a little bit more for something 10 times better. I think that continues. It's just the whole supersize and the big gulps and all that. You just like more for less, less, less. And that is vulgar in France. It's just something that just, it's not seen that way. I mean, it's changing a little bit with the new generation, but so I think that it comes from that. Whereas, and to be fair, I mean, other families, I had Italian American friends. Oh my God, their mom and their aunts would get together and make these meals as if they were from Italy, So there was, I do remember that. I remember thinking, oh my God, this is really good Italian food. But they had that tradition they saved with them, I think. And a lot of the cultures, my grandmother came from Poland, but we had her sister would make wonderful traditional Polish food. But that gets lost a lot of times, when the immigrant comes over here and it's just substituted by, the 50s came along, TV dinners, look at all those old ads, convenience, you're working, or the housewife's home, let's make it convenient. All these things happened that affected the quality of food. So I think pre-World War, people had farms and things were more able to garden to table, but
Yeah, I mean, from my experience in, say, like Spain and Portugal, it's that you have better access to better quality food and it's less expensive. I know European salaries are less than American salaries, but even like based on a European salary, I still think that that's a relatively less expensive circumstance to buy better quality food in Europe versus in America. One, I can't find the quality of ingredients here, not even in specialty stores. And if you have to go to a specialty shop, it's going to be very expensive. Again, my experience, I've been to France, but Spain and Portugal, Italy, I've been there. It's just anywhere. Like your local convenience store that would be compared to maybe a 7-Eleven has fresh bread and they might bake it there. And they have cured meats and not like Slim Jims. I think not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I think culturally, maybe it's a capitalism thing. I don't know. But it's certainly a lifestyle thing where we don't, again, my opinion, I don't think that we take the time to like have that experience. And I think part of not taking the time is that we're not afforded the time because, we're working 40 hours a week for somebody else. We're commuting 2 hours a day. So that's, say, commuting an hour a day, total round trip. That's 50 hours a week that's devoted to somebody else. I used to work with people in Europe and they would always joke that I didn't take time off because I was in America. And like, guess what? I didn't. Like they were always on holiday and I wasn't. I think American culture, hustle culture, or whatever it is just about grinding and to put in the work to get yourself from where you're at to where you want to be. But I think it's a false premise that doesn't happen.